Hey there, welcome to Martha's Fragrance Corner. If you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. If you're new here, and even if you're not, I've been doing these book reviews once a month because I love reading. There's a lot of things that I love to do, and I kind of fell out of reading consistently in 2023. And then in 2024, I got back in. I was like, I was going to make time for this. I love this. And here we are in 2025, and my reading and consistently reading every single day. I have been reading every single day this year, and that has continued. So in February, I read 5 books. I have a mix of some great books, and then I have a little wah-wah. And I'm going to start with that wah-wah. I'm just going to go in the order that I read these in February. I do have my reading journal down here. I've been trying to, make sure I write stuff down. I want to even change that up a little bit, maybe write in my journal as I'm reading instead of waiting till the end and, trying to remember everything that I thought while I was reading the book. But regardless, let's start with the first book. If you're interested in hearing what I read in February, then stick around. Okay, so the first book is actually an audiobook. It was an audiobook. The name of the book is called The Stolen Queen, and the author is Fiona Davis. New to me author. She's written several books before. And what caught my interest in this, it came out in January, so it's a fairly new release. What caught my interest is, it mentioned, I think in the little summary, that this took place, it's like in the 1936 and 1970s, New York and Egypt, lost artifact. I'm thinking, kind of like adventure, Indiana Jones or something. I was thinking like that, but with women. And it wasn't quite that. So let me give you the setup here. So there's Charlotte. She's the older woman, back in 1936. It kind of goes back and forth. She was a young woman in 1936. She had gone on to Egypt to do like an excavation work. And while she's in Egypt, they're discovering artifacts, and it's in an area called the Valley of the Kings. There's some tragedy that happens to Charlotte in Egypt. And throughout the book, you have that dual timeline when you're kind of having flashbacks. It slowly unravels kind of what happened in Egypt and how she ended up in New York. But, that's kind of coming out throughout the book. So I'm not going to say more than something happens to Charlotte. And that's why even in the beginning of the book, there's a mention like she never wants to go back to Egypt, blah, blah, blah. Well, anyway, this artifact from this queen, from Queen of Egypt, comes to the Met. And they're not sure who loaned it to the Met or what, but Charlotte is now a curator at the Met, and now we're in the 1970s, like 1978. And so then there's another character named Annie. And Annie is a young girl. She's like 19, and she and her mom live together. She has this family dynamic with her mom where she's almost taking care of her mother. Like her mother is just really useless and very vain. I think her mother used to be a model, and she just can't consider hard work, right? She's really always kind of defined herself in the work that she does by her looks. And so Annie is scraping by. She's really playing the adult in this story, is scraping by, trying to find jobs, to pay rent, blah, blah, blah. So I really found Annie's story to be very interesting with that dynamic with her and her mom. And then Charlotte's story for me wasn't as interesting. This book, the pacing of this was so, for me, just didn't work for me. I'm like, where are we going to get? When are we getting to Egypt to go find this stolen thing? So obviously the night of the Met Gala, Annie lands a job working for this fashion icon in New York at the Met Gala. And that first night that she's there, the Met Gala, basically the night of the gala, this artifact from Egypt goes missing. They think that Annie had something to do with it, that she was in cahoots with whoever went in there and stole this artifact, and some of Charlotte's work goes missing as well. So Annie wants to clear her name. Charlotte wants to figure out what happened to this artifact that's kind of shown up throughout her life, back in 1936 and now back in the 70s, right? So for me, that's what I was waiting for in the book, like the adventure to go find this and go to Egypt and, figure out kind of the mystery of what happened to the stolen artifact. But it really took half the book to get to that part, to get to the part where, it's the Met Gala and this thing goes stolen. So I found it really slow in the beginning. But, I persevered. I don't know why, because I felt like it's going to happen. And so it did happen. We finally get to the adventure in Egypt, but it's past half the book here. And that part was completely rushed. So I really felt like, if I was the author, I would have spent more time kind of playing back Charlotte's past here and having some adventure, meeting back up with old friends in Egypt and helping find this artifact. There is another little twist that's kind of added here at the end of the book when you start to discover what happened to Charlotte in Egypt. So the back half of the book, or the back third of the book, I found really interesting, but at that point it was really rushed. I mean, I felt like it turned into like a Scooby-Doo episode where they find the bad guy like in a matter of 2 days in Egypt, and they confess the truth, so that's what it felt like. I'm like, that was way too easy, way too wrapped up in a bow, and way too rushed. And then there were some other little issues that I have. And normally I can read books and let things go and like, all right, fine, this, and yeah, okay, I'll pretend that happened. But what bothered me too is Annie, who had never left New York, right? And she's like 19, has been dealing with, taking care of her mom for her young teenage life and young adult life. Like, how did she get a passport, like literally within hours? You know what I mean? It's like that stuff bothered me. So unfortunately for me, this was not a book that I enjoyed. I mean, I like that little part at the end. But yeah, I had to give this like a 2.5 stars. I think this is the lowest book I've rated this year. Unfortunately, yeah, it just didn't work for me. I had higher expectations, and I'm not familiar with this author. I don't know if you have read this author. I like historical fiction too, but yeah, I don't know. It was kind of clunky and it just didn't work for me. So that was The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis. Okay. Next book. I read this one. I also had it in audio, but mostly I read it. I love the cover of this and kind of matching. This is Alice Feeney, Beautiful Ugly. This might be the third Alice Feeney book that I've read, so I do like her writing. I think the first one I read was like Rock, Paper, Scissors, which was also good. That was a couple years ago. And I love this cover because I don't know if you can see here, but there's like a cut in it. And then it says a novel down the front, and it's got a little metallic on the writing. And here's this, island out in the like a Scottish island. So I do love the cover. This book, she writes stories where, you're kind of like, they're suspenseful, I would say. I give this kind of like a thriller, but also a mystery. And usually there's something like really twisty in her novels. So I do like Alice Feeney's books that I've read so far. And this one was no exception, but I will say that I think this could be very divisive. I think people are either going to enjoy it or people are not going to love where this book goes. I liked it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, I believe, like 4 solid stars. So the story of this one is there is an author. He's an author. His name is Grady Green. And he just wants to write, and he wants to write books that people are going to love, right? He's married to a journalist, and the story begins where his wife is coming home. He's waiting to hear from his publisher on whether his book made it to the New York bestseller list, and his wife is late, and she's driving home. And then he's on the phone with her. She's like called him, sorry, I'm late, but I picked up, I think, fish and chips. That was like their dinner that they would celebrate with. And so he's on the phone with her when she stops the car and she says, there's someone on the road. There's something on the road. And he's saying, don't get out. Like, don't get out of the car, And she's like, no, there's someone on the road. I have to go check. And so Grady's on the phone with her. And she doesn't listen to him. She gets out of the car, and then that's it. Last he sees or hears from his wife, she's gone missing. He goes to the site of where she went missing, sees her car door open, and everything's there. So doesn't know what happened to his wife. His wife was getting some death threats for some articles that she had written in the past. So there's that piece of it. So there's what happened to his wife? Well, Grady, is devastated that his wife is gone. He can no longer write. Time has now gone by. I think a year goes by. He hasn't been able to write anything. His publisher or his agent, kind of feels bad for him. And she says, hey, I have a place in this remote Scottish island. There's a cabin there. Why don't you go there, try to write, get away from all this? And, maybe that place was where another famous writer had written some books and it seemed to work for him. Why don't you go there and try to write? Because he just can't get it out of his mind that his wife had gone missing. So he goes to this remote island, and that's when things get weird. Everyone's a little quirky on the island. They're kind of odd. He can't quite put his finger on it. He doesn't know if he's slowly losing his mind, because he finds certain things. He found under the floorboard in the cabin the last book of the author that lived there, a book that he never published. And he reads it. It's a good book. And so he wants to maybe no one's going to know that this guy wrote this book, and he rewrites it himself, but he's basically copying this other book. So he's working on that, and he starts to get paranoid about that. The island has no cell service. There's really no way to get off the island, because it's only the people that live on the island are really allowed there. It's not tourist season. They only allow people during, the summertime. And everyone on the island is really close. And so he feels like there's a secret going on there, and there's just really odd things. He starts to hear things. He thinks he sees his wife on the island, but then it's not his wife. So he has kind of sightings of his wife. So a lot of strange things starts to happen on the island. I can't give away more than that because I don't want to spoil anything. But I will say the end of the book, I literally said, WTF, what just happened when I finished this book? I was like, did not see that coming. And that's kind of what Alice Feeney does. The endings usually are okay, was not expecting that. And this one was no exception. So I'm not going to give away any more other than I enjoyed it. And hey, if it's a book where you remember the ending and you're like, oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, I saw some things coming. I won't say it was a complete shock, but I didn't think the author was going to go there with this book and how she ended it. And I think that's where there might be some people who may not like the ending of it. I think it was different and interesting. So I did enjoy this book. This one is Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. And yeah, it's kind of a little mind-bending and odd. Let me know if you've read this. This came out, I think, in either January or February. It's a really new release. It was this year. Let me know if you've read this book, because I'd love to talk about it with you. And that is Beautiful Ugly by Alice Feeney. The next book is The Women by Kristin Hanna. This was, I think, everywhere last year. So let me know if you read this book. And I've read Kristin Hanna before. The first book I read from Kristin Hanna was The Nightingale, which I loved. I loved that book. And then I read The Great Alone. I did not read The Four Winds. And the reason for that is, one, I didn't hear, I think it was just okay for a lot of people. The Great Alone was heavy. I liked it, didn't like it as much as The Nightingale. But what I liked about Kristin Hanna's writing in The Great Alone was that sense of place and how she made Alaska feel like a character. And that was like the first time I think I've felt like a place feels like a character. It is so integral to that story. So I think she's a great writer, but she's heavy. There's a lot of heaviness in her work. So I was not in the mood for like this heavy book where I know I'm probably going to cry or something like that. So I kind of put off reading the Women, but then I just kept hearing more and more people talking about it. I'm like, okay, this might be a book that I'm going to have to go and read Kristin Hanna again. And, I did like her other books, but I just felt like I just need to be in a special mood for it. And you kind of do, but I would say this is a fantastic book. I gave this one 5 stars. I'm so glad I read it. I'm so glad that I didn't just say like, I don't know if I'm ready for a heavy book. I'm really, really glad I read it. So let me know if you read The Women. This is a story about Frankie McGrath. She goes off to be a nurse during the Vietnam War. And she comes from a military family. Her dad has this like wall of heroes, right? With pictures of the family line. It's all men though, right? And Frankie is young at the time. And she's, there's a party for her brother who's going to go off to Vietnam. And she's kind of at this party, but she's looking at her dad's wall of heroes. And one of her brother's buddies comes up to her and said, women can be heroes. And that stuck in her head, like women can be heroes too. And so she realizes she wants to be a hero and go to Vietnam and help. Well, she's completely unprepared as it is, but she's a really good nurse. So she learns quickly and you feel like you're there. And that's what I do love about, I think, Kristin Hanna's writing is like you feel like you're there without getting too flowery and without it being like dragging on too much. But, Vietnam was a part of the story. It's a huge part of the story and what it was like. And as I'm reading things, I'm envisioning these emergencies coming in and smelling like the moldy and musty and sweat because it's so humid there and all of those things. So Frankie meets 2 other women there who are nurses. They just become fast friends. You're almost bonded for life when you're dealing with such trauma. And so Frankie goes there. While she's there, her dad is not happy. Her parents are not happy that she went to Vietnam. So she doesn't really have their approval that she went there. It's in the beginning of the book, so it's not like a huge surprise there. Her brother does pass away before she even gets to Vietnam. And so she's got that tragedy. Well, it wouldn't be a Kristin Hanna book if it wasn't like one thing after another. There was a point in this book where I was like, will you just give Frankie a break? Like literally, I was kind of mad at the author. I'm like, give her a break. But it was a great story. It was beautiful. This does take place during a huge, decades, really, of Frankie's life from the Vietnam War to coming back to the States when, there was a lot of protests about the war where, she was being spit on for being in the army. And so, you're dealing with Vietnam and then coming home and nobody cares or people are upset with you, right? And trying to find her place again. She's obviously dealing with PTSD, but back in the 70s, they didn't really know what that was. And the whole time she's really trying to find where she belongs now that she's back. and she's haunted by the trauma, PTSD, basically, from being in Vietnam. There's, she's got loves in her life, people that she's loved and lost. And so this was just a really great story. Yes, did I cry? I did cry. I had some tears as I was listening to the story. But I loved the ending. I love the ending. So I will give you that. But she goes through a lot, but it was beautiful. It was just a beautiful story. It was heavy. It was tragic. You had a story of perseverance. You had a story of her friends that she made in Vietnam just sticking together when times were tough, when Frankie was just needed them the most, they were there. So I love that bond between the nurses. And that just also hearing about that part in history and from the perspective of the women. You heard it from soldiers who've been in Vietnam and what time was like coming home and all of that, but never really heard about the women that were in Vietnam. In fact, there's times in the story where she does go to the VA and they're like, there were no women. You can't be a vet. There were no women in Vietnam. There are no women, and so she never feels like she belongs. Like even the VA doesn't acknowledge that there were women in Vietnam. So just a fantastic story. I'm not going to give more than that away, but if you've read it, let me know what you thought. Did you love it? Are you a fan of Kristin Hannah? Should I have read The Four Winds? I don't know, but yeah, just really, really glad I finally got around to it. And yeah, so this is really about finding who you are in life and and persevering and staying strong and friendship. So that was a great book. That was The Women by Kristin Hannah. Okay. The next book is The Crash by Freida McFadden. So this is the second Freida McFadden book I read. Last year I read one, I think it's like I Tell Lies or I Told Lies, something with lies. I've heard she seems to be a very prolific writer, so there's definitely more of Freida McFadden I want to read. Let me know. I know she's got The Maid, I think that's really popular, and maybe there's like The Boyfriend recently. But so I'm just diving into Freida McFadden, and The Crash just came out, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to read that one. That seems to be a good one. And this one I ended up giving 3.75 stars. I liked it. I did like it. What I do like about Freida McFadden's books, I feel like it's kind of a popcorn reading. I read through them very fast. They're very fast to read. So it's a nice little palate cleanser, especially reading kind of a heavy, book like The Women. It was just like, okay, let's go to something completely popcorny and fun, if I can call it fun, reading. So this is a story about Tegan. Tegan is a soon-to-be single mom. She's 8 months pregnant. She's, struggling. She thinks she's going to have a big payday. But it doesn't turn out that way. I'm trying to see like how much, it's always with mystery thrillers, like how much she should give away. But she decides like she can't take this guy's money. This guy was going to pay her off and she decides she can't do it. So she's going to, so she's feeling horrible when she has a realization of what really took place on the night that, the reason this guy's going to pay her off. And she talks to her brother, and I think the brother is all she has left. I believe her parents have died. She's going to go visit her brother. He lives a couple hours away. He's like a ski instructor. And because she wanted some extra money, she took an extra shift. Can I say that? Shift at the grocery store. And she got on the road a little later. Unfortunately, there's a snowstorm coming, and she thought she could get there before it comes. Well, no. She is stuck in the middle of nowhere. She kind of went off the road, doesn't have great cell service, and ends up hitting a tree. Like she was trying to brake, her brakes don't work, and she ends up hitting a tree and breaking her ankle. And, she's like, no cell phone service. It is snow is coming down hard. She's afraid she's going to die. She can't move her leg. It just hurts too much. And, she's not sure what she's going to do. In the meantime, this man drives up and he offers to help her, but he's a big guy, full beard, and just, someone who anywhere else, or even there is like scary looking, because he's just like, oh, this is a guy that you would be scared to meet, right? But she's stuck. He takes her home, offers to take her home because they can't drive to the hospital because, they're in the middle of like a blizzard, snowstorm. Takes her home, and when he gets home, his wife is there, so she feels more relaxed, like, okay, maybe I don't need to worry about this guy so much. He's married. And they put her down in the basement. The woman, the guy's wife, I forget her name. She used to be a nurse and was taking care of her mother who had cancer in the basement. So they already have a hospital bed down there. The mother had passed away since then. But so they set her up downstairs in the basement. And then that's where Tegan starts to realize, like, maybe something's off here. Why aren't they taking me to the hospital? They keep making excuses that electricity's out or the phone line's not working anymore. But the wife seems really nice. But, they keep putting off taking her to the hospital. And she doesn't want to deal with the husband because he scares her. She just starts to get these really, really odd feelings about the situation. What bothered me about this book, although I did enjoy it, but Tegan, I know she's young, but I felt she was dumb. She was just dumb. I felt there's a couple times where I found her so frustrating, and I'm like, would you really do that in that situation? So I got a little frustrated with Tegan, but, set that aside for a little bit. It was a good story. If this to you sounds a little bit like the way I'm explaining it to you, like Misery, I would say yes. This definitely was influenced by Misery by Stephen King. She's broken ankle, not getting help, that she's not being taken to the hospital. She's kind of been held captive there. So yes, that is definitely, I'd say a Misery light popcorn book thriller. So I did enjoy it, but I gave it I think 3.75 stars because Tegan was a little annoying and it was predictable, but still enjoyable. I still enjoyed it. So let me know if you read The Crash by Freida McFadden, and if there's any books that you would recommend from Freida, since I've only read 2, and any books I maybe should stay away from. So let me know. Okay, here we are. Last book. This is Someone Else's Shoes by JoJo Moyes. So one of my goals too is to read the book of the months that I order. So Beautiful Ugly was a book of the month in, I want to say January. And JoJo Moyes, this one, Someone Else's Shoes, this is from February of 2023. So I've had this book for 2 years. And I do enjoy JoJo Moyes. There's several books of hers that I've read. I probably have read maybe 6 of her books, maybe more. The last book from JoJo, and I hope I'm saying her last name correctly, from JoJo Moyes is, or was The Giver of Stars. That was a 5-star read for me. I loved that book so much. And I still recommend that to many people. If you like historical fiction, that one I talked about in like a favorite video maybe 2 years ago. It was like in Kentucky with the women's library, like on horse. I forget now what it was called, but there was a name for it. But anyway, The Giver of Stars, fantastic. So that was the last JoJo Moyes book that I read. Then she's kind of an auto buy for me because I've really enjoyed her book. So I got this one, but I hadn't heard much about it. And again, this was like 2 years ago, but I'm like, let's get through my backlist here, my stack of books. So this story kind of reminded me, if I were to compare it to something like Trading Places, so that kind of theme. There are 2 women in here, Nisha and Sam. Nisha is, she married rich. She's uppity, snotty. Everything she has is designer. That's Nisha. Then you have Sam, who is kind of mousy, doesn't have that confidence. There's stuff going on with her marriage that, they're kind of struggling there. She's got a daughter. So family life is rocky, and she's got a job that she doesn't really love, and her boss is a jerk. So those are the two main characters. Well, they're at the gym at the same time, and their bags get mixed up. Sam ends up taking Nisha's bag. Nisha ends up taking Sam's bag by mistake. In Nisha's bag are these Christian Louboutin, Christian Louboutin. See, I don't wear those shoes, but the red shoes, right? The red. She's got the Louboutin shoes, and she realizes this isn't my bag, but I mean, she's got to wear them because she's got to make this presentation. And she puts those shoes on, and there's something about them that make her feel more powerful, more confident. And then at the same time, Nisha is only stuck with Sam's shoes. So they're literally, switched places, switched shoes, and have to walk in each other's shoes, literally. Well, and in the meantime, so Sam is like feeling a little better. She's got the Chanel blazer, she's feeling a little more confident, and everyone loves these shoes. At the same time, Nisha tries to go back home to like this penthouse at a hotel, and she's locked out. Her husband has like locked her out of her finances, wants a divorce, gave her nothing. And so that's the setup of the book, literally kind of like trading places. And then, how they kind of meet back up to give each other their shoes and stuff. So what I found the beginning of the book a little slow. Like, I didn't really like Sam's character. She was okay. I didn't like Nisha's character because she was just very entitled and kind of spoiled. And I really didn't feel bad in a way that her husband just shut her out, and she had nothing but literally the clothes on her back. So as you can see what's going on here, Nisha has to kind of learn to survive without having much, which is a place that Sam is very used to and normal. And then Sam is learning to kind of gets this confidence, and is starting to realize that in order to fix her life, because her life is a bit of a mess, she needs to change what she's doing and how she's doing it. And so she starts to take up boxing lessons and stuff like that, gain her confidence. So anyway, that's kind of the beginning of the book. And I did find it like I kind of didn't care about the characters in the beginning. Is a little bit of a slow start, but the second half made up for that, the little slowness in the beginning. The second half is where they do meet up. I love the supporting characters in this book more than the main characters. They were fantastic. One of the supporting characters is a maid at the hotel where Nisha's husband is staying and where Nisha used to live. And then Sam's friend has cancer. She's going through like chemo and cancer treatment. Those women were fantastic. Then it's kind of like a fun book on trying to get those Christian Louboutin shoes back that somehow and all of this went missing. So this book has some charm. It has some laughs. You're off with them trying to get those shoes back because basically Nisha's husband won't give her anything until he gets those shoes back. They're very important to him, and you're starting to wonder why those shoes so important to him. And he won't give her like a dime until he gets the shoes back. So the second half, I really did enjoy. Again, a story about kind of friendship, a little madcap of trying to find these shoes and get them back and what they have to do to get them back. That was kind of fun. So in the end, I did enjoy the book. I ended up giving this one, I think, 3.75 stars. Like the charm, like the friendship. But the story wasn't for me, as good as I was expecting from JoJo Moyes. And it's a thicker book. And I'm looking at a book that I picked up last month from her. It's called We All Live Here. That's a brand new release. That one's even thicker. So I feel as authors write more and more books, their books get thicker and thicker. But this one is okay. But it had heart, and I think that's why I ended up enjoying it. But it I don't know. It was hard. It's hard to, I think, beat her last book, which is The Giver of Stars. So anyway, those are the 5 books that I read. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know what you're loving. Let me know if you've read any of these books. I'm excited to talk about what I've been reading in March, because I've had already, I think I'm on book 3, and it's been great. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm starting to lose my voice, so it's time to go. I will chat with you later. Bye-bye.